I'm going to call the meeting to order. We have everyone here tonight: Townsend, Davies, Benning, Miller, Atkins, and Elliott. Missing is Chad Wade. And we don't have anyone here for public discussion, so we'll go on to case number REZ 25-0004. Lisa, are you presenting?
I am, yes. Does it need to go back to? Oh, the screen.
That should be good.
All right.
Here comes Chad.
And Commissioner Wade is entering.
Hi, my name is Lisa Schroer, and I'm a planner with Neighborhood and Development Services. The proposed text amendments to the zoning code stem from two areas. The first is general code cleanup items that staff document in an ongoing list. These are things like fixing typos, references to outdated department names, things that were missed when the code has been updated in the past, and sections of the code that directly conflict with another code section. The second reason for these code amendments is changes in the Iowa state law that preempt certain areas of our local zoning authority. A state preemption occurs when state law limits or overrides a city's ability to regulate certain issues locally. And when this happens, we must update the zoning code to ensure compliance with state law. The proposed ordinance would result in minor code cleanup amendments related to the following list. I will go into more detail on each of these in the following slides. The proposed ordinance would also result in amendments related to the following state preemptions. First, we have the Iowa Cell Siting Act, which is codified in Iowa Codes Chapter 8C. And then we've got recent changes to accessory dwelling units. This is Senate File 2369 that the governor signed earlier this year, building on the 2025 accessory dwelling unit legislation. When we make code amendments related to code cleanup items and state preemptions, we'd use a least change approach that clarifies unclear requirements or references to outdated department names and ensures compliance with state law while preserving local oversight when possible. For this presentation, I am going to focus on explaining the summary of changes that we are proposing to the zoning code, and I won't go into detail on the justification for these changes, but the justification for each proposed amendment can be found in the staff report in the agenda packet. First, I'll go through our code cleanup items. The first one is related to our external stairways leading to multifamily residential dwelling unit requirements. The proposed amendments revise standards in the building features permitted within the required setback area subsection, and they also replace the reference to dwelling units with multifamily residential dwelling units to improve clarity and consistency. The amendments clarify that stairways serving as the principal means of access to multifamily residential dwelling units located above the ground or first floor may not extend into any required setback. As a safety measure, in a different section of the zoning code requires that access to multifamily dwelling units located above the first floor be provided from an enclosed lobby, corridor, or stairway, because unenclosed exterior stairs can pose a safety risk to residents. The proposed amendments align these two sections. The proposed amendments also increase the validity period for Board of Adjustment approvals from 6 months to 12 months. The current 6-month validity period can be difficult for applicants to meet, During this time, applicants must obtain a building permit and start construction within this window. Oftentimes, they also must acquire an approved site plan prior to obtaining a building permit. The amendments will give applicants a more realistic timeline to complete their projects. We are also proposing to replace the existing maps for arterial streets, the university impact area, and the central planning district with updated graphics that include clearly labeled streets and boundaries. With this change, we are not proposing any changes to boundaries on the university impact area and central planning district maps. We are also proposing changes related to our tandem parking spaces in single-family developments requirement. The proposed amendment revise the garage, driveway, and parking location standards for single-family and two-family uses by removing the phrase "counting the space within a garage" from the tandem parking provision. These amendments clarify that tandem parking spaces may be provided either within a garage or carport, or within a driveway, or in a combination of both locations. The zoning code does not require single-family or two-family uses to have a garage, which makes this phrase confusing for those interpreting the code language. The amendments clarify our current practices. The next code cleanup item, the proposed amendments remove superscript reference 2 and its corresponding note from Table 2A-1, which is our principal uses allowed in a single-family residential zone table. Note 2 references a special provision in Section 14.2A.7d, recognizing existing two-family uses and attached single-family dwellings on interior lots in the RS8 zone as conforming. In 2005, the zoning code restricted duplexes and attached single-family uses in the RS8 zone to only corner lots, making existing mid-block uses non-conforming. As part of this, Note 2 in Section 14.2A.7d were added to the zoning code to protect those uses by treating them as conforming. In 2003, City Council amended the zoning code to allow duplexes and attached single-family uses throughout the RS8 zone, not just restricted to corner lots. Note 2 no longer serves a purpose, and we are proposing that it be removed. The proposed amendments also remove the planned development overlay provision that requires attached single-family and two-family duplex uses in the RS5 and RS8 zone to be located only on corner lots with each main entrance oriented towards a different street. This is similar to the previous one. This section is proposed to be deleted to align the planned development overlay standards with the city's recently adopted code changes that removed the corner lot requirement from the base zoning standards. The proposed amendments also update outdated department names and procedural references throughout Title 14 and 15. References to the former departments of Housing and Inspection Services and Planning and Community Development are updated to be the Department of Neighborhood and Development Services. And also, where applicable, references instructing submittal to the city clerk are replaced with the city to improve accuracy. The proposed amendments also exempt mobile homes in manufactured housing parks from the 500 square foot detached single-family open space requirement in the RR1, RS5, RS8, RS12, and RNS12 zones. Under the current zoning code, each mobile home within a manufactured housing park approved through a planned development process is subject to a 500 square foot detached single-family open space requirement. However, manufactured housing parks are developed as unified sites with shared open space and amenities rather than as individual lots, making a per-unit open space requirement for each dwelling unrealistic given the layout of these developments. We also recommend code cleanup related to the minimum compact open space area requirements for multifamily uses. The proposed amendments remove the multifamily requirement that each compact open space area must be no less than 225 square feet in area. We also establish a minimum open space dimension of 20 feet in the multifamily open space requirements. Currently, the multifamily open space standards are split across 2 areas of the zoning code, and those 2 areas conflict with each other. This inconsistency creates confusion for applicants and staff. The proposed amendments resolve the conflict by bringing section 14.2a/2b/2c-4e into alignment with section 14.2g7e standards that already apply to multifamily uses. The proposed amendments also update the RS12 zone open space requirements to allow multifamily uses to count rooftop or upper floor open air terraces and rear yard facing porches, including non-habitable screened-in porches, towards the open space requirement. RS12 currently allows alternative open space options to fulfill the open space requirement for attached single-family uses. Attached single-family developments are visibly similar to townhome-style multifamily developments. The proposed amendment will fix this gap so that both use types can meet the open space requirement the same way. The proposed amendments also remove the word bulk from section 14-5H-8, which regulates the storage of combustible and flammable materials. This amendment was requested to us by the fire department, and removal of the term clarifies that the requirements apply broadly to both above ground and underground storage tanks, regardless of their size. The proposed amendments also increase the height that triggers a fence permit requirement from 6 feet to 7 feet. The city formally adopted the 2023 edition of the International Residential Code, or IRC, as part of Title 17, which is our building code. This IRC edition increased the fence height threshold that triggers a permit requirement from 6 feet to 7 feet. The proposed amendments align our zoning code with that adopted standard. The proposed amendments will correct the open space dedication formula by replacing the acronym PUD with the acronym PDU so that the formula is consistent with the definition provided in the legend, which is persons per dwelling unit. This one's just a typo fix. The proposed amendments, this is our last one for the code cleanup. They update the form-based code section to align with the city's recently updated accessory dwelling unit standards, which were amended to comply with Iowa Code Section 364.3 earlier this year. The form-based code has specific standards for ADUs. This is in Section 14.2H6 for carriage houses, which must be removed to ensure compliance with state law. References to carriage house standards are replaced throughout Article 14.2H with direction to the city's ADU standards, which are in Section 14.4C2A. The amendments include updates to the building form tables, the accessory use table, and the building type standards for all form-based code zones. That brings us to our first state preemption. This is the Iowa Cell Siting Act. The Iowa Cell Siting Act limits the factors that local governments may consider when reviewing applications for wireless communication towers. Section 8C.3 of the Iowa Code prohibits local authorities from evaluating applications based on the availability of alternative locations or requiring applicants to demonstrate that co-location is not feasible. This requires us to update Section 14.4b.4, which is our specific approval criteria for special exceptions. The amendments remove the approval criterion that requires applicants to demonstrate that the proposed cell tower services serves an area that cannot be served by existing towers or by locating antennas on existing structures in the area. This proposed change is applied in 2 sections of the zoning code that outline special exception approval criteria for communication transmission facilities in residential, commercial, interim development, and public zones. And then our next state preemption is Senate File 2369 on accessory dwelling units. Earlier this year, Iowa legislature adopted amendments to Iowa Code Section 364.3 on how cities can regulate ADUs. The legislation does three things. First, clarifies that a minimum of one ADU will be allowed on the same lot as a single-family residence within a zoning district where a single-family residence is allowed as a principal use. The legislation also revises how the size calculation for an ADU. The size of the ADU cannot exceed 1,000 square feet or 50% of the size of the single-family residence, excluding unfinished basements. And then lastly, the legislation clarifies that ADUs located in areas of historical significance shall be regulated to the same extent that a city or commission determine that the proposed ADU would be incongruous with the historical, architectural, archaeological, or cultural aspects of the area and enters into its records the reason for such determination. This provision preserves the Historic Preservation Commission's authority to review ADUs in historic districts. This is a change from the 2025 ADU amendments. The commission can now regulate or deny an ADU, but only if it makes and records a specific finding that the ADU would be incompatible with the character of the historic area. This is a process requirement for the Historic Preservation Commission and does not require amendments to the zoning code. For this one, we've just added two changes to our ADU section. We add the text within a zoning district where a single-family residence is an allowed principal use to the ADU applicability standards, which clarifies that an ADU may only be on the same lot as a single-family residence that is also within a zone that allows single-family dwellings. We also specify how floor area is calculated when determining how large the floor area of the ADU may be, noting that the size calculation excludes unfinished basements. That brings us to our staff recommendation. First, staff recommend approval of REZ 26-0004, amendments to Title 14 zoning to clarify requirements and ensure compliance with changes in state law related to communication tower facilities and accessory dwelling units. We also want to add that for Section 14.3A4, which is our standards related to duplexes or two families, removing the restriction that the ones along the block are non-conforming. We want to expand this to the same section that's right above this section, 14.3A, 4C, 1A, 1C, which is for attached single-family residential. That brings us to our next step. This is sort of an outline of how we've gotten here. We are at the bolded section here, so if Planning and Zoning Commission recommends that we move this forward to City Council, at the next City Council meeting on May 19th, the public hearing will be set, and then following that, at the next City Council meeting on June 2nd, the public hearing would be held, as well as the first consideration. And with that, I'll pass it back to the chair.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the commission? No questions? Oh, do you have a question?
A couple. On the number 9, the open space one calculation where there were two conflicting measurements, I'm just curious, like, what went into deciding which you proposed going with the more restrictive one, which is 20 feet minimum and the 400, and just curious if there was consideration of.
Yeah, so this change does two things. The first one is removing that 225 square foot compact area, which is actually allowing it to be more permissive for that one. And then the second one is, increasing that minimum dimension from 15 feet to 20 feet. This one is making this requirement similar, the same as our riverfront crossings and Eastside mixed-use multifamily. So it is a little bit more restrictive with that 20 feet, but it's kind of a lateral movement to align this with another section of the code.
Because doesn't the 20-foot minimum, that would mean nothing could be smaller than 400 square feet, so the getting rid of the 225-foot minimum isn't, that's still making it more restrictive, right?
I'm not sure I'm following. The 225 foot is like a minimum compact area. So you could have two areas that are 225 feet. The compact area is like if you think about that specific section that's like partitioned off from the other one. So we're removing that.
That seems like it would be helpful to, like, if you're
So
trying to
you could have two
find
smaller
a
areas than
site or
one,
something, yeah.
one larger area, yeah. I guess going back to the 15 and 20 feet, the other thing we were looking at is we are considering these code cleanups and not policy changes. So reducing it to 15 is more of a policy change.
Yeah, that makes sense. Though you're more commonly using and referencing the 20-foot in like riverfront crossings and stuff, so just making
In
that
both
consistent.
sections, it references 15 and 20, so it's it's inconsistent. So we're going with 20 just because we're calling this a code cleanup and not recommending policy changes to our open space requirements. But if the commission wants to go a different route, you can make that recommendation.
Steve, you mind expanding on that a little?
Yeah, I'm coming from a place where I had ran up against this on a project, and it was tough on a tight site to find that open space. And, 20-foot minimum is just on, if it's a 50-foot wide lot, it's kind of hard to do that unless you put it on the roof or something, which is expensive and
Right.
requires elevators and stuff. So just more flexibility in kind of how you, the minimum dimensions and stuff seems like it would be helpful to provide that open space on a tight site, but
But like generically, I think we've kind of looked at like essentially increasing land utilization a lot. And so that sounds like that 225 is a little bit more flexible for land use or property use. Is that my understanding correct?
It could be. I think, it depends on the site, because like Steve is saying, for multifamily sites, it's typically not grass on the ground. It's incorporated into some rooftop or terrace or something like that, because you want to use as much of the parcel as possible for development
Right.
and units, right? So if you think about 225 square feet on a rooftop and the other standards that want it to be usable and have some sort of recreational purpose, that's not a lot of space. Staff agrees that the open space requirements can be a challenge for some sites. So we recognize that. I guess we're not here to debate that. We're here to just make sure our code is consistent.
no.
If the commission wants to go a different direction and make broader changes to open space, they can certainly recommend that to council.
I don't know how that's done. So, I mean, I think
You
generally.
just make it as part of your discussion and part of your recommendation if the commission wants to go that route.
Would it be better to have like a separate conversation about that in context, I don't know if right now is maybe, maybe more information is needed before proceeding in that direction.
It'd be better to take like a deeper dive into it
Right.
versus like,
And this is on our radar and on our to-do list, so, if the commission wants us to bring it back sooner rather than later, we can.
Yeah, because, the idea about putting it on a rooftop is kind of great in theory, but if I'm thinking about kind of the missing middle, smaller scale where potentially you don't have an elevator or something that would trigger an elevator then to get up there. And yeah, so I think bringing it back, having staff look at it and bring it back whenever it makes sense, but would be good. And we can just proceed with the code cleanup for today.
That makes sense, because you'd want to be changing both of them because there's two different instances of this code appearing, right? So you'd be wanting to change both if we did change it, so they're matching, is that correct?
I mean, I think the direction from
Yeah.
the city attorney's office is we should wait.
Yeah,
But,
that ma- yeah.
yeah,
That's what I'm agreeing with.
yeah.
Any further questions?
I guess I have one question, just because it seemed like we had sort of two types of changes, sort of errors, and then kind of bringing things up to match state law. The one that didn't seem to match, or I didn't quite understand, was the change to the stairways in multifamily use in common area. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Does that fit with one of those, or is that just a safety issue?
Yeah, so there's a section of the code that requires those stairways to be internal. And then there's the separate section of the code that we're changing, that we're just trying to make it more clear that stairways that access the dwelling units above the first floor, that stairway for multifamily dwelling units above the first floor needs to be enclosed.
Okay, understood, thanks.
I just had one, make sure I understand it correctly. On the ADU size, that's 1,000 square feet max, or 1,000 square feet, or 50% of the primary residence, whatever is larger. So like if you had a 4,000 square foot home on a site, you could have a 2,000 square foot ADU?
Correct.
Okay, just making
Yeah.
And on the ADU, who is actually living in the original unit? We talked about that some time ago. That's a,
Yeah, that's not changing with this
That's not-
amendment. It could be rented or it could be owner occupied.
okay.
Both the primary and the ADU, right? Could
They
be
both
either.
could be rented, yeah.
But we did get back some historic oversight this
Yeah,
year.
for local historic districts and local historic landmarks.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
And there's only one ADU per unit, unless it's a duplex. Then there's possibly two.
It'd still be one with the duplex, because the definition in the state law for single-family residence is not just limited to single-family, but it still limits it to one ADU per property, essentially. So if you had a duplex, it would still be
One
one
unit.
ADU.
Okay.
When I was reading through where it was actually, red text for the changes in the zoning code, I was a little, or at least I was having trouble finding the size, because you struck on the ADUs again. It just says refer to that subsection, and then I can't find it now. The thing the line item right below it was like other, and then it's like a 1-story maximum. Are ADUs allowed to be like 2 stories or above a garage or something, or is it just a 1-story maximum?
I don't think we get into height in those standards.
It doesn't
It's,
say. Okay.
Are you talking about the square footage and how we calculate size, or the height?
Just in all these, like T3, neighborhood general, or zone edge, all the different where it's crossed out. The accessory structure just says C subsection 14(4)C2A, and like accessory structures below it, other is a 1-story max, and you crossed out 2 stories max.
Because
So
we
just
can't limit it to 2 stories based on the new state law.
Got it, okay.
Yeah.
So it's just, the square footage is the,
We still regulate height, but it must be treated like a single-family residence. So it's subject to the same height standards as a single-family residence.
interesting, okay.
Prior to the code change, it would have been subject to our accessory structure standards, which are different, but now we treat it like a principal,
see.
single-family home.
That makes sense, thank you.
No further questions? Do we have a commissioner who wants to request motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
That's Miller, approve.
Second.
Townsend, second. All in favor? Or is there any discussion? Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next on the agenda is update on the comprehensive plan. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, so I guess now it's just an opportunity for, I know we've had a couple steering committee meetings, and Commissioner Miller and Commissioner Wade have been in those meetings. If they want to provide any update, staff can give an update. If the commission has any questions on the status, we can answer those too.
Steve, you want to go?
Oh, man, there's a lot. I don't know how to summarize it well.
I'm kind of having a hard time hearing.
Sorry.
If you guys could,
Oh, sorry.
maybe it's my cold, but if you could speak into the microphone, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know. We've had two presentations.
Gonna do it.
Is that better? We've had two presentations by Confluence. Both the last two meetings with the steering committee have been virtual, where they basically presented drafts of 4 different chapters, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't remember the names of each chapter, but it was
The land use was the biggest one,
Yeah,
obviously.
land
We
use.
did go over land use. And so I think that was probably the largest discussion point and going to be of most interest to the commission once that comes before us. But I don't know if you have any.
There will be, like, they've sent those to the steering committee, but that will get published for public comment before it gets finalized, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. The simplification of like all this little subzones and into the new land use plan makes a lot of sense to me. I think they're doing a great job.
Yeah, I think some of the biggest, I guess if I could note some bigger changes that we're proposing with the future land use map is we're creating more flexible land use categories that allow a variety of types of uses and even within residential zones, so it's not single-family duplex, which is kind of how our comprehensive plan currently functions. We're also incorporating some what we're calling opportunity areas to identify kind of transit corridors where multifamily or higher density housing and other uses may be appropriate, as well as neighborhood nodes for maybe non-residential uses in neighborhoods. So those are things that we're exploring, and we're also doing a build-out analysis to ensure that, and this is kind of a, it's kind of a theoretical, kind of technical study to look at. We know what our population projections are. We know how many units we're going to need over the next, 25 years. And we want to make sure that the land use plan that we're putting forward is able to accommodate that growth, and not just that growth, but probably more than that growth, because we all know that we're not going to build out the city in 25 years, right? So we just want to make sure that we're planning for the future needs of our community. So that's something that we're looking at now. The next big chapter that'll be coming to the steering committee will be transportation, and that'll have a lot of ties in with land use. We also looked at housing as a separate element as well. So we're still plugging along. We have some drafting to do and some more work, and eventually all of this will be made public to the community to provide feedback on the drafts.
What's the process? I mean, does the community vote on this? Do city council?
City council, it'll come to Planning and Zoning Commission for a recommendation, just like the rezoning tonight, with the recommendation to council, and then council will be the decider.
What are some of the kind of the first public comment or publicly available material? Is that just going to be when it comes to planning and zoning recommendations, or are any of those kind of preliminary meetings televised or anything like that, just to get information?
There'll be public open houses where the materials will be made available, and we'll have the materials on our website.
Got it.
Prior to it coming here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have a timeline for roughly when that would occur?
No, at this point, I don't know. I think longer term, we're hoping to get it adopted by the end of the year, but I don't know where the open houses fall between now and then.
And by adoption, it would just be adopting the comprehensive plan, not necessarily the changes to the code or anything to
No.
accommodate some of those?
No, it's just the plan.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what made you change your name, the name from planning and zoning to neighborhood planning and, what is it?
Oh,
The department name.
Yeah.
yeah.
Not
I
your
was
name.
not, I was not involved in that. I don't know. Neither was Lisa.
Yeah, I think they merged housing and inspection services and planning and community development departments into one.
Okay.
I think it was part of Tom Marcus's era. He wanted the city to be more fast, friendly, and flexible. And so it was a way
Okay.
of being
I was just curious.
providing better service to the public.
Okay.
So
Commissioner Townsend, I thought you said I'm furious.
No, curious. Would I be furious?
over the name.
Over name change.
So, yes.
Okay.
Any further questions or things you want to bring forth? Consideration of meeting minutes from March 4th. That seems like a long time ago.
Was-
Do we have a
Motion to approve?
proof?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 0. Planning and zoning information, Ann?
Oh, gosh, I'm not prepared for this one. Which ones did we have? We had something adopted recently. Was it
Was it the parking?
the parking? So, yeah, we made changes to, oh, I apologize.
Hotel Vitro.
Yes, that was adopted, thank you. Yeah, the hotel to residential conversion amendment was adopted. And the Sky Commerce preliminary plat was approved. That's for that kind of intensive commercial development out by west of the former Pearson property. That was also approved.
What's happening with downtown with, the parking lot across from the senior center? Is
21
anything
South
happening?
Lynn.
Yeah, I think the city council voted on a proposal, and that's really out of the city manager's office. I believe they're working with the winning proposal to move that project forward.
Is there any information, I saw it come to council recently, the Orchard Court development? There's a LIHTC project maybe going on there. I mean, that's something we kind of see our portion of it, and then it kind of just exists out there, and then we never see it kind of come to fruition, so is there any way to kind of gain additional insight just to see where it goes in that journey from, once it goes through council approval and goes to rezoning to actually see some affordable housing come to fruition and so on?
Yeah, I mean, are you saying can the commission get updates on those types of
Well,
things, or?
it's just interesting because like, we see like how that flows through our process and then goes through city council. Then there's a kind of a long resting period. And then next thing you know, there's a development that's potentially gets funded and pretty major or significant change and kind of exciting to see, Billy, we always talk about affordable housing and it sounds like this might be one of those projects that really is able to kind of support, fulfill that request.
Yeah, that was two rezonings, one in 2018 and one, I believe, in 21 maybe. So that just shows you how long the development process can take.
Yeah.
And we're not even at construction yet.
Right,
We're
right.
still at site plan review and,
Is that where it's at
Yeah.
currently? Okay.
It still amazes me how much talk there is about affordable housing and how little is actually being done. With all the committees and commissions that are working on it, and we still have such a long way to go. I'm still working with Habitat, and they're getting ready to do 4 units on Prairie du Chien with Hodge, which I think is great, but that's just a drop in the bucket. So what's the city doing?
I mean, that's why we're working on a comprehensive plan update right now. That's why we made all those code changes in 2023. I think what staff has been stressing is that we really need to focus on supply. We need more housing, period, at all types, all incomes. And as you can see, we are not meeting that often, right? We're not seeing a lot of development. We are working on a residential development analysis to try to get a sense of how much activity is going on. The city is also trying to become a developer of its own, and we want to develop that site on North Summit Street. So, I mean, we're doing what we can, but we can't build all the housing, you know? The developers, it's very expensive, and there are partners in this for sure.
I've heard about a parking study that's being done. What is the timeline on that?
That, we probably have another at least 6 months on, but we will be bringing amendments forward to the commission at some point.
Based on that?
Good discussion. Do we have a motion to close the meeting down?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Second. Miller? All in favor?
Aye. And she's still not furious.
Okay, good.